And then I thought, I'm going to do some AI searches on this. So first of all, this is what I saw that struck me and put me down this path. So there was one report, a musician called New Breed. I have never heard of him, right? He's a younger guy, of course. He had a beautiful wife named Brandy. They didn't give her age, but in these pictures, she looked to be in her 30s max. And it said that she died unexpectedly. Then there was Tori Kelly, a country music 2-time Grammy winner. She collapsed, 30 years old, and was being treated for blood clots in her vital organs. There was a couple others that actually died that were young. I couldn't remember who those were, but I did find in Canada Press, this is also, say, in the last week, Tyson Downs, a hockey player, 18 years old, sudden death. They never seem to know what caused it. It's either died unexpectedly, died suddenly. And sometimes, I will give them this, they will mention cardiac arrest. This Tori Kelly, in the story, I believe it did say she was in a restaurant and started feeling chest pains, and then this collapse happened. Now, back to the search. So I decided to use bard.google.com. It's an AI tool by Google. The reason I chose that one, there is ChatGPT, but I believe from what I heard is it only goes through some point in 2021, where the Bard tool supposedly goes all the way to present time. So that's why I chose that. So I'm not going to insinuate that these deaths are related to any one thing, but I'm just saying, let's look at the timelines. Let's look using these tools. Okay, so this is nothing I've come up with. This is through the tools that are out there scouring stories on the internet. Another one was Sinead O'Connor, but she was 56. But I also believe the initial reports, now I don't know what the most recent reports are saying, but I believe the initial reports was it sounded as though it was an unexpected thing. So let's start with, I said, okay, I'm going to first go to Bard and I'm going to punch in this question. Sorry if I have to look down, but I'm reading from my notes and exactly what I put in. So I wrote, how many times do the phrases died unexpectedly or died suddenly appear in Google searches before November 2020? Now, the reason I picked that is because the pharma products were released starting, I believe, in December 2020 and kind of were rolled out through around February 2021. I could be inaccurate either way a little bit on those, but that was basically when they started the rollout was in December 2020, and then January 2021, I think another one was released in February 2021. So Bard came back and said that total between the two phrases, unexpectedly and suddenly, there were searches just before that totaled 11.5 million. So these were searches that people did just before the release of the pharma product. Now, they did say in this answer that it spit out to me that, that could have been due to David Bowie had died of a sudden heart attack, and then it lists other people that had died, but it goes all the way back to 2014. This one died of heart attack. It talked about Carrie Fisher, Robin Williams, Muhammad Ali, Aretha Franklin, and it kind of put that in its summary. So then I went back using basically the same question, but so the 11.5 million was just before the pharma product release. And then this one was just after the release. So I asked, how many times do the phrases died unexpectedly or died suddenly appear in Google searches after January 2021? Well, it said there was a total of 8.2 million searches. Okay, but then I thought, okay, in the first question, before November 2020 goes from that time period all the way back to things that have been posted online. So that could be decades, right? Where the second question after January 2021, because that would be post-product release, it went down to 8.2. But think about it, 11.5 for all of time in all things that are still, if they're still available on the internet, and we know they've also scoured and whitewashed a lot of stuff and got rid of it. But if you go just from January 2021, and I didn't put an end date, so I said after January 2021, which would basically bring us to present time, it was 8.2. So in a much shorter time period, that number is way higher. So then I said, okay, well, let me streamline this information more. So then I started putting ranges. So I said, how many times do the phrases died unexpectedly or died suddenly appear in Google searches between November 2019 and December 2020? Now that's a 13-month period just prior to the product release. And that number was 6.6. And it said it may have to do with the high-profile deaths in that period. And it lists a bunch of celebrity deaths. Now, that was 6.6 million times. And that was the 13-month period just before the product release. Then, so then I said, okay, well, let me put the 13-month product after the product release, the 13-month period. That would have been January 2021 to February 2022. The number drops. It drops to 2.5 million. So then I thought, okay, let me, I'm going about this wrong. Let me instead ask the question, because we're talking about the end users doing searches on what phrases were top of mind at the time. So those phrases were popular during those time periods, but that's just what they were searching for. What numbers were actually out there reporting? So this gets more granular because now you're saying how many pieces of content were out on the internet during these ranges, meaning what articles, they could have been blog posts, but they could have been CNN, Fox, could have been any media outlet as well, right? So that is the next thing I started to look up. So I change up the question and I say, how many times did the phrase died unexpectedly or died suddenly appear in an article or news story online? Now this would be just before the product release. November 2019 and December 2020. And it said it was 2.6 million times that either of these phrases just before the product release, 2.6 million times. So then I said, okay, let me again search, but just post-release, so just after. So then how many times did the phrase died unexpectedly or died suddenly appeared in an article or news story online after January 2021? And that number goes from 2.6 million to 3.2 million. So this gives us an indication that just after product release, how often these events are being reported by media or bloggers or whatever on the internet. The point is the AI got these statistics through, I guess, knowledge or intelligence, showing statistically how many times these phrases appeared. So then I wanted to get back to ranges, only how many times do these appear in content versus the original search, which is searches on Google. So then I went to how many times did the phrase died unexpectedly or died suddenly appear in an article or news story between, and I picked a range between January 2022 in June 2023. So that would be a year and a half after release. And it's also one of the most recent searches I did. So it's not just after the product release, it's after some time and it's gained steam. And now we're in January of 2022. So now the number goes down to over 1.8 million times. So then I thought, okay, well, let me go to an earlier time, because now the number has dropped in the last 18 months up to present time. So let me try to get a window that goes closer to when the release was. So I picked January 2021 through present time. For my present time, I'm using June 2023. So that means all of 2021, all of 2022, and half of 2023. So now we're at a 2.5 years after the product release. So that number shoots up to 4.6 million times. Died unexpectedly and died suddenly appeared in content or news stories or blog posts of any kind on the internet. So then I had my numbers post-release. So then I said, okay, let's wind it back because we want to compare apples to apples. So if I'm going from the last number I just quoted you was the 4.6, that actually was from when product release happened, which really started gaining ground in January 2021 through present, and that was 4.6. So that was a 2.5 year period post product release. So the obvious thing is let's look at the 2.5 year period pre the product release. So remember, we had 4.6 million. So how many times did the phrase, and I won't repeat it, but those phrases appear in article or news stories online between June 2018 and December 2020. This is just before release. And that number drops to 2.9 million. That, my friends, is what I was after. I knew that just common sense. You know, I work on the internet every day, and in my personal life, I do research on the internet. And I'm not one of those people that goes out and searches celebrity news. This is stuff that's just being served up to me when I go online to do any kind of research search. So it's not like I'm going to see who died that day, or this is just, I don't know what news feed it is. It's actually, I use different browsers, and this keeps coming up on Bing, which I believe is a Yahoo feed. I think it's a Yahoo feed. And it's just like day after day, there's these young people just dropping dead. And so just from a common sense point, that's why I started thinking about it more and more. I thought, I wonder if this AI tool could give me some more indicators. So these deaths, if it's suddenly died unexpectedly, does not mean that they all point to a pharma product release, right? It could have been anything outside of that, because it could have been somebody who didn't accept the product release, right? So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying stand back, look at the numbers, and you could draw some conclusions. Now, of course, this is all my opinion, and I can't prove who died of what. But when you roll back, even to the numbers aren't necessarily as high as the numbers post. So just that in itself has to tell you something. And then the other indicator is common sense. Do you ever remember a time in internet history going on and every day seeing 18 and 20 and 30 somethings just collapsing? And a lot of these people are athletes. They're in the top of their game. Their health should be better than anybody who's my age or older, right? So why are they just unexpectedly these things are happening? So just that in itself, if you're on the internet, you would notice this. You would notice these stories just popping up constantly. I don't know if all this comes on television, because I don't really watch a lot of television. Somebody out there might know. But anyway, the bottom line is, at the end of all these searches, we go from the 2.5 year period before to from 2.9 million times that these phrases show up in stories to the post 2.5 years, the post product release, to 4.6 million. So, my friends, that's a big jump. Now I can go over, I had a bunch of statistics and benchmarks, but let's just look with what I ended, and then I'll wrap this up. So, the 2.5 years after release, it jumps to 4.6. The 2.5 years before the release, it's at 2.9 with a difference of 1.7 million. And again, this report is it's not in stone. I'm saying that these, because it can't give you real indicators of real counts of death. It's basically just measuring the amount of times that these phrases that are indicative of those deaths was reported on. So it's numbers of news reports, not numbers of deaths. So you have to be real clear on that. But it just shows you that those numbers are starkly different. And those 2.5 year periods butt up to each other. So it's not like we've gone way back in time. It's just the 2.5 before, and then that was my end date on that range, and then the 2.5 after picks up from where the first range ended. So it literally does a jump from 2.9 to 4.6. Okay, so is this scientific, whatever? No, I can't prove any of this. I'm just saying, open your eyes. Ask these questions. And I can't make any claims on what these sudden deaths were. I don't know. And there's one more thing before I go that I want to, this was really strange. So I started this search, so let's just say on day one. On day one, I started doing the Google search information. I slept on it. And then on day 2, I picked up on the other search. Now, on day 1, it just gave me information, and that was the end of it. Guess what? And this is where the AI stuff, you see, AI, from what I understand, is learning. And it's not only learning across the board in general, it's learning you and the questions you ask. On day 2, it starts giving me health and safety notes. So it didn't just give me the numbers. I'm just going to read. So on the first day, it said, according to Google Trends, the phrase is blah, blah, blah. And then it just went into the statistics. Well, on day 2, when I start asking questions, it starts giving me these weird notations called additional safety information. And it says the phrase died unexpectedly or died suddenly can be triggering for people who have lost loved ones due to unexpected or sudden death. Please caution when using these phrases. If someone is struggling, and it goes on and on and on with these safety notes, which did not appear the first day. So if that, step back, look again, what does that tell you? It tells me something. I just think it doesn't like the stuff I'm asking, and so it's putting all these cautionary notes, and it's cataloging all this too. So know when you do this, it's cataloging everything and keeping it somewhere in a database. So safety notices on information like, what do you think I'm going to do with this? Who knows what these safety guidelines are going to say in the future? If you should search on this anymore, you will be penalized. Who knows? That's just a guess. But anyway, I just wanted to bring this information to you. Very interesting. If you find it interesting, you yourself can do your own searches. You might even get different numbers. I don't know. Or you might ask more insightful questions than I did. And before I go, I just want to let you know I went kicking and screaming to social media. I would never have a Facebook or Twitter page. But what I did is I did set up a Gab account, Getter, Rumble, of course, and Substack. So if you go to truthseekersradioshow.com, that's truthseekersradioshow.com, you will see links to all of my social right at the top of that page. Again, Gab, Getter, Rumble, and Substack. Also, you can check out some of my articles on beforeitsnews.com, beforeitsnews.com. And also, I have written a book. It's in the publishing process right now, but what I decided to do was release the first 2 chapters for free to my audience. So if you go to truthseekersradioshow.com, you can actually download these first 2 chapters. You just put your email in. I do not share any information with anyone. I promise you that. And then it will take your email and it will email you the first 2 chapters of the book for free. So once again, I really thank you for your time today. And you know, since I started this show on radio in 2010, it's always been my thing to just look at information you're served up with a critical eye and ask questions and then talk about it. Tell people that you come across in your life. It's so important at this time, I believe, that we need to get more truth out to more people. And when I first found out what was going on, that was in 2000. Well, back then, there was barely anybody awake. But now, I mean, more and more people, shockingly enough, are waking up to stuff that's going on. So take heart. Always look up to the Lord. He will help us get through these things. We have no control over it anyway, but maybe you're here for such a time as this to do something. Just even if you just talk to people that you know when you find out information, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be something just as small as talking to a neighbor. So again, truthseekersradioshow.com, and thanks again for your time, and until next week, God bless.